Alrighty folks, welcome back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. So, I'm going to start another little series on some stuff that I've covered off and on with doing your backups, doing your data storage, doing a lot of stuff, and that's your hard drives. And I've mentioned use an external hard drive. I've shown you some enclosures, I've shown you a lot of things, but I wanted to do a series really on the hard drive itself. What is safe, what is unsafe, to know what you can do and how you can do it. And today there's a huge variable in a lot of these things, because what is safe, what is not safe, and all of these things are kind of an open, changing, flexible term, and everybody doesn't really quite understand a lot of it. And none of it really is even explained. So I've gone through some of the differences in hard drives. So head on over to my channel, pause this video, hit subscribe, hit the bell, number 1, so you can get all the updates and get all the future notifications on when the rest of this series is coming out. So you know, so you don't miss anything. And then come on back, watch the video. So for this one, I really wanted to touch on the drives themselves, the safety of the drive. And that's a huge, huge variable today, because there are so many different style drives. The one I don't have up here is NVMe, but I've shown that enough that really the safety of the drive is a huge factor, depending on what kind of drive you actually have. So most drives that you'd probably be hooking up externally would be a SATA drive. You probably won't be using an NVMe because there's no benefit to using NVMe over SATA. And you get into cables, you get into all those other type of factors that come into play that make that difference not a difference. It's a hindrance or a slowdown or a bottleneck due to that cable you connect this drive to your computer. So there is no benefit to going NVMe other than size. So there is a reason why I've shown the NVMe cartridges, I've shown NVMe drives, and M.2 SATA drives. So you have the big SATA drive and you have the small SATA drive. They're basically the same, except for size. Then you get into the security side of it. Do you want a larger drive that you know you can see it, that you know it's safe, that you can put in a place, or do you want a smaller drive where you may end up losing it because it's too small? So some of these factors are directly related to the drive itself. What size, what format, and such and such. Then you get into modern day drives. The old spinning mechanical discs. The 2.5 size drives. There are some security factors and some things to be concerned about with this drive. You have the controller board exposed. This one I have in a case, but you can see through. It has casing all the way around it. There's nothing really exposed on the bottom. And people go, oh, it's not a big deal. You can't damage. You can damage this because I have done it personally myself. Playing around, doing testing, doing some stuff, not paying attention to what I was doing, and I've burned up a drive. Because you cross-circuit it by putting it on metal or something, and you're just not paying attention. You've done it hundreds of times, thousands of times, and it's just that one time, bzz, and it's gone. You kill the drive. So that's a security factor to be aware of on the drive. Even the really, really old ones had a circuit board on the bottom. That's why you put them in the case, to make sure it was secure. This is a really, really old IED. Nobody has IED, shouldn't be running IED today. .5 drive is the size of the drive. Same SATA, same power, same external. There's a difference here. This now gets into concept of security. Is there a difference between this drive and this drive? No. Size is the main factor between these drives. Weight is a main factor between these drives. If you want something light, you're going to transport around, odds are you're going to do this. You want safety, security of your drive. Probably want to do something, you can do something like this. Not to mention, usually these bigger drives are larger in size, contain more data, and are a lot cheaper. You can buy an external case, one that's powered, and other things. I have some behind me, docking stations, those little plug-ins. That'll be another video coming up, because that's a factor on this. A lot of things, if you're using it as a everyday type of a drive, backup drive, or any of those type of things, I don't recommend any of these for that. Unless you have a safe, secure drive that's enclosed. So that's one of the little factors I wanted to bring up about the actual physical drives themselves that not a whole lot of people talk about. They talk about going with the SATA, they talk about going with this because of the speeds, they talk about, the solid states, but there's a different factors also that come into play. If I can pick up a new drive, 30 or 40 bucks, get an enclosure for 30 or 40 bucks that can support that drive, whatever it is, and you have a full backup drive. You can buy drives, spinning mechanical and an enclosure, but the difference is that enclosure has a proprietary, usually, port on the drive. It's a different kind of port and drive. So you can actually go out and buy the standard NVMe drive with a standard port, and say you get 300 gig drive, 2 years from now you need a terabyte or 2 terabytes, or you had a terabyte, you want to go up to 3 terabytes. That enclosure usually can support, now I'm going to say usually, depending on what the board is and all of that in the enclosure, usually it's upgradable up to a certain point. So if you go to a 3 terabyte drive, all you have to do is buy the drive. You don't have to buy a new enclosure. You don't have to buy the whole thing all over again. You don't have to go buy an external drive that's worth so much that you can't upgrade because you can't get a replacement drive. What if that drive you have fails or is starting to fail? Now you have server drives and other things that have the software in there that tells you how the drive is doing. If it's going to need to be all the smart technology that's like in these. So there are advantages and disadvantages to using the different things. Pretty much if you're using it as an external storage device that's hooked up to USB, they're basically going to be about the same. Of course, this will outperform a spinning drive any day of the week, no matter what comparison and how you have it hooked up. That will outperform these kind of drives. But if you're just doing backups and you're just saving stuff and you're just doing other things, that's what you want to do. Of course, now if you're gaming and you're doing other things and you're doing some other things that are faster, you don't want spinning mechanical at all. Odds are you probably won't even want this external. You're going to want it inside your case. So these are some of the little factors that I know I mentioned, but I really haven't pressed the security of the drive. I've talked about buying the external cases, putting your drive in there, and such. But I never went through why you need that external case. And when I get into the adapters in the next video about how to hook them up, show you how it's recognized, show you some of the little quirks and some of the other little things that go on. And the other issue that is out there is a lot of people just use these USB drives. It'll do the same function as the drives. You have security, safety, it's an enclosure. This is pretty much the same as this. It's electronical. It's not spinning mechanical drive. So these two are kind of in the same ballpark as these, along with M.2, SATA, NVMe. But you get into that transfer rates, you get into the data transfers, you get into what can I reuse and what can I use later and how can I do things later, where this is always going to be this. This with an adapter cable is this for now. You can take this off, put like I did here in the mounting bracket, mount it in the computer. Guess what? It's now an internal drive. What was the cost difference? $2 to $3 for this, a couple cables that you probably have or you got to get. That's the difference between this and this. So you have the upgradable and flexibility to use this as an internal drive. Let's say if you buy a new case, you have built a computer, you bought a pre-made computer, little mini computer type like I have, got the reviews, got the unboxing, all of that type of stuff. I can buy a case. If you've watched the review and unboxing on that, I don't need to. There's a bay in there, space in there for this. I've mentioned it. So this I can actually physically plug into the USB port and use it. And at some time when I really decide, you know what, I need more space, take it out of this enclosure or not even have it in the enclosure, put it in that computer. This device is always going to be USB. So wanted to go through and explain some of that because a lot of people I don't think really explain the difference between these. And last year I did a lot of rabbit hole videos, but went into some of these details. And I didn't go very deep into this because I planned on doing it in the future. I needed to find some of the stuff I had laying around because this is common stuff anybody that works on computers usually has around. This is stuff they have. They have these docking stations that you can plug in the different size drives in. So you don't have to change the enclosures. You don't have to. Nowadays, it's pretty much the same port, same everything. This is more of you're going to plug in a drive and it's going to sit there for a while. You're going to try to pull data off of it. It's going to be there for maybe a week, for several hours. You have little things like these. This is more of a standard of what people are using that will give you power that you can plug into IED. There it is. So they're a little different. These plugs sometimes are on the front or back or top. So you have these options. This option and this option are very different. I've mentioned it before on what kind of drives they're really designed for. That one and that one can be used on pretty much every drive. It has a separate power. You don't have to worry about it. The other one pulls from your USB. That has some other issues where I talk about power supply issues, motherboards, a lot of other things. You need to make sure you have, USB 3 to provide enough power to provide to the drives. Use one of these, you don't have to worry about it. So these are some of those variables out there. I'll go more into depth on some of those. But that all directly reflects on exactly what I'm showing you. The drives, the security of the drives, enclosures. You don't have to buy a super expensive enclosure. You don't have to buy a super expensive external drive. So you have all of these options that are out there. You can go NVMe style. I bought it because it was cheap on sale and it's really small. That's what I wanted. I wanted the size factor. I know there's no difference in speed. There's no real difference in performance between a SATA drive, but it was the size. And it was not a bad price at the time that I bought it. So those were some of the factors that got me to get what I got. Not, oh, I need this or I need a... It was 2 terabyte, I believe, of a drive. That's more than enough for me. This one here is 2 terabyte drive by itself. You can get larger drives. I think they have like 36, 50 terabyte drives on spinning 3.5. So, wanted to go through this and explain the differences and what you want to do with this drive is sealed, enclosed. You got the port open, but it's pretty much, if you buy these, you will see what I mean. They're pretty much sealed and in good shape. Don't recommend the off brands, the cheaper brands, because the enclosures are really kind of cheap. You can feel the difference. And when I've done testing, data transfer testing, and all the, benchmarks, get some weird results. Now, if that would affect the performance, not too sure. If you truly do your backups to the proper way, where you have it on 2 different drives, 2 different sources, so you don't have one failure point, and you buy the cheaper drives, you're probably okay. Because you have it in 2 places plus your original. That would take some really catastrophic major failures for you to lose all that data at once. But, it could happen. Likeliness, probably not. So, that is one of the issues with these kind of drives. Is they're enclosed. They're nicer that way. And the one I have at work where I took it apart, the boards are really small. Most of this is empty in here. It's just this little part that had the board. The rest of it's completely empty. And the one is a Samsung. It's a metal case. This one I believe is plastic. If there's a difference for you, truthfully, I kind of like the plastic because you all know metal conducts and does other things but metal also transfers the heat away from it. So if you have this externally sitting there, plastic I think would be perfectly fine. So there's some of those little variances in the drives. Some of the really cheap ones, you could tell it's really cheap stuff that's there, but it's an enclosure. That's probably not any different than you buying an enclosure for this. But the reason why you want an enclosure on this is because of the board. It's pretty much exposed on the bottom. You have to have safety and security on that. And then you toss it in somewhere to store it. You don't want anything getting on there. You don't want anything dripping or any moisture or humidity or anything to ruin that circuit board. So that's just one of the factors I wanted to bring up about the individual drives themselves. And of course, when you get into NVMe, I kind of leads back into this. It's kind of an exposed board. You probably want to put it in an enclosure. unless you put it in a computer. They make docking stations now where you can put the drive. I don't really like that. If you get into computer tech, you know you're supposed to wear a static strip. You're supposed to ground your stuff. Now you're touching that actual circuit board with your bare hands. That's a whole nother factor, whole nother security issue, a lot of other things. You take it out, you put it somewhere, put it in enclosure. It's kind of the same philosophy with this. So that is another reason why you might be more interested in a SATA enclosed drive. So this is kind of the weird catch-22 of the drives themselves. If you're a gamer and other things like that, and you back up your data, back up your games from your internal SATA drive to an external drive, you might want to really pay attention to this too. This can affect you, because if you just have one of these drives sitting out there that you're... Remember that board. Data recovery, to change out a donor board or any of that, is pretty expensive to try to recover your data. Just because you didn't put it in an external case. You don't want to take those kind of risks with your data, any of your data. So you want to make sure that's always safe. That should be your number one priority, is the safety of these drives. Where you put them, how you store them, all of those factors come into play. So that would probably lead you a lot more to a drive like this. But knowing you could buy a drive like this, put it in an enclosure, and it'd be basically the same security-wise as this. I have drives and enclosures and other things around, but everybody pretty much knows what those are or can look them up, because there's so many variables on enclosures that really I didn't figure it was worth showing. So, want to wrap this one up. Thank everybody for watching. Hopefully that'll explain enough about the drives, the security wise of them, of the actual drive, keeping the drive safe. Thank you so much.